Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan from Step by Step Painting, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint. You can grow your own way. This is a fun little cactus succulent style painting in a traditional red wagon. A very detailed painting that can be simplified, so you can do not as many cacti plants in the wagon. You can also change the quote. You can do a different quote at top, or you can even add a little quote on the wagon itself. A lot of different creative directions you can go with this. I'm going to go over colors and brushes. So we have 9 colors for this, actually 8 colors for this. We have Cad Red Deep Hue, Primary Red, Cad Yellow Deep, Cad Yellow Light, Light Green Permanent, Phthalo Green, Mars Black, and Titanium White. And I only used 2 brushes for this, so you'll need a 3/4 wash brush for the background and a number 4 round brush for the rest of the painting. You'll need a cup of water for rinsing your brush. And I found this T-square ruler really helpful. We are going to be drawing the wagon, so that I found helpful with kind of the alignment of the wheels and the actual wagon itself. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm working on an 11 by 14 inch canvas, and the first thing I'm going to do is paint this really bright, vibrant background. It's got like this hot pink, lime green, bright yellow color. I was going for this really vivid, deserty sunset look. And let's start with the primary red. So primary red is a color that looks kind of pinkish. So that's how we get this vibrant color. If you don't have primary red, you could use another red, although it may not show up super bright and kind of pink, and it may not mix well with your yellow to turn bright orange. Just FYI, or you can sub with quinacridone magenta or some kind of pink magenta color. So we're going to start at the top, a little bit of water on the brush and load it into the primary red. And you're doing left and right strokes. We're just doing a very basic blended background of these colors kind of blending together in a gradient. And with the primary red, we're going to go down about 3 inches and stop. You're going to load your brush without rinsing it into your yellow. So this is Cad Yellow Deep. It's a dark yellow. That's going to create this really deep orange color. If you don't have this particular yellow, again, you can use any other yellow that you have available, and that will mix with the primary red still and make an orange. So you start below the red and then you blend it up into the red, and it will instantly turn orange. So it's wet on wet blending. And you want to go down maybe a couple more inches with that. We're a little bit higher than the halfway point on the canvas. And then you want to rinse the brush. So we want to have yellow that's not mixed with red in this, so that we actually see some yellow in the background. So rinse the brush and dry, and then load it into just the yellow. Take that yellow and start below your orange, blend it up into the orange. So I call this working the transition zone. So where your 2 colors are meeting and blending, you want to just brush over that several times, and that will get that to blend together. And then without rinsing, you saw me grab the white. So this is titanium white. Do the same thing. Start below your yellow and blend it up into the yellow. So this white is going to brighten your yellow up. I'm actually bringing this up even further, kind of going back over those transition zones. I don't want too much white to get up here at the top, and especially since the red is pretty much dry at that point, I can't really work that. Let's grab more white and let's go below our yellow here. So since I kind of brushed it up at the top, I have a little bit of pink on my brush, and that's okay. I'm working it a little bit, and now it's turning kind of a light peach, which is fine for this area of the sunset. I'm just going to bring it up. It's important not to over blend these colors. We don't want them to all kind of mesh together and turn the same color. And also, we don't have to have a perfect gradient blend. So I'm going to rinse this off all the way, get all that color off my brush, grab my white, and I want to do a little bit of pure white down here. Even though this is just going to not be pure white in the end, it's going to allow me to transition to green. There's green on the very bottom of this, and I want my first kind of base of this to be white so that my green will blend gently with this color up here. So this is pure white, although I have some peachy colors kind of blending in there. I'm going to be very careful when I bring this up to the top so that too much white doesn't get up into the sky area. A little bit more white down here at the bottom. We can go all the way down with this white. It's fine to do that because that is going to help with the blending of our green. I'm just going to leave maybe a little slither of space on the bottom of the canvas. But if you wanted to take that white all the way down, you can. Oops, we have like a little streak of yellow in there. Bring that across and we are good. So I'm going to introduce my green. And before I do that, I'm going to make sure, I'm going to rinse all this off just in case I have pink on my brush. I don't want to mix any of that reddish color with the green and get like a muddy color in there. So let's rinse, dry, and let's grab green and white. So I'm mixing maybe about equal parts green and white together. Start at the bottom. This is green and white, light green permanent titanium white, starting at the bottom. So the bottom part is going to be our darker part and it's going to blend up to a lighter green. So I'm just going to get this whole bottom part painted and I'm going to add a little bit more white onto this. A little bit more white on my brush. Take that white, blend it up, and we have this green area that's just going to kind of mesh with that brighter part of the sky and sort of just disappear. If it makes more sense to you, you can kind of define where that horizon line is, but I am just allowing this green to disappear and blend in with that lighter part of the sky. So it's still kind of part of the whole gradient of the background. Because this is a very detailed painting, there's nothing else really going on in the background. So I'm not doing like a definitive horizon line landscape sort of thing. It's just a gradient of color. And then all our detail is going to be in the wagon and the cacti, the succulents. So if you want to know spacing, maybe about 3.5 inches of this green, and at about the 3-inch mark kind of disappears, if that makes sense. We could grab a little bit more of the pure green and add that on the bottom just so it's a tad bit darker at the bottom, and then it just kind of still fades out into the rest of that lighter color. So there's our background. Let's wait for this to dry before going on to this step. So if you're using the traceable template for the wagon, now is the time you can transfer that to your canvas. If you are drawing this with me, I recommend using this T-square ruler or just any flat edge and kind of line it up with the edge of the canvas. This is going to help us get the alignment of the wheels and the structural part of the wagon. So I'm going to start by drawing this horizontal line on the very bottom of the canvas, and that line represents the bottom of the wheels. So you want to do that line at about the 1-inch mark. So measure about 1 inch from the bottom of the canvas. Take your ruler and draw a horizontal line all the way across. And the second line that we're going to do is going to represent the height of the wheels. So both of those circles are going to be on the interior of those lines. I'm talking about the front wheels, not the 2 wheels that are kind of in the back. But that line is going to be about 2 inches from that line. So the height of the height of those 2 circles are 2 inches. So that second line is 2 inches from above the first line. And then you're going to sketch 2 circles. So the height of the circle, the diameter of the circle is about 2 inches. So you're doing 2 circles that are on the interior of both of those lines. And if you're like me, you can't draw a perfect circle. You're just going to kind of sketch it, or you can find something like a compass or something that's 2 inches in diameter and trace that. But when I do circles, I kind of estimate the size of it, and then I kind of draw it multiple times, see how it's kind of sketch-like, and you just kind of keep drawing your circle. Holding your pencil very loosely helps until you kind of get the size, and because you're drawing it multiple times, at least one of those times will be right. And then we're going to do the wagon. So I'm just going to kind of do a second horizontal line above those two wheels. It's like a little slither, maybe 1/4 of an inch, maybe even less than that, above the wheels, because we still want to kind of see the part of the wheels that attaches to the wagon piece. So another little horizontal line to represent the bottom of the wagon. And then do the corner curves on the left and the right. Just kind of do 2 curvy lines and going up vertically. The height of the wagon is about 1 3/4 inches. Again, you don't have to do these exact measurements. I just throw them out there to be helpful, but you can definitely just kind of estimate the size if you want. And then above the wagon, we have another little slither kind of lip area. Maybe that's like 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit less than 1/4 inch high. And then we can kind of sketch little beams that attach from the wheel to the wagon. 2 little diagonal lines, and then 2 little circles inside of both of the wheels. And I'm going to take this bottom line and extend it out towards the left, and I'm going to sketch the handle. So I'm going to actually have this go up and bend a little bit to the right, maybe a little bit of an exaggerated bend, but you can kind of change the angle of that if you want. And we'll just kind of maybe do like a little circle piece over here where it attaches. So there's our basic wagon drawing. These back wheels are optional. If that's a little challenging, you can kind of skip that and we can just see the very, very front wheels, but I'm just sketching 2 more circles. They're behind the front 2 circles and they're a little bit elevated from the bottom line. And so when we're done with the drawing portion, we can start painting it in. I'm going to use this really deep red color. It's called Cad Red Deep Hue. If you don't have that one, you can substitute to any kind of red. If you have like a really bright red, you can add just a tad of black into it to kind of darken it. But let's start by using just the red on our number 4 round brush. And we are simply going to just start painting the wagon. So I'm just taking my brush, kind of outlining the exterior shape, the curves, and I'm going to start filling it in solid. I also have black and white on my palette. I will be using those colors to kind of do some shading and highlighting, but for now I am just filling it in the bottom portion with the red. So I found it helpful to use the T-square to kind of line up down here. You can also use painter's tape. If you don't want to get paint on your ruler, you can just place a piece of painter's tape down here. So that'll get that bottom edging to be straight without going outside the lines. So basically, I'm going to fill this entire shape in below the top lip, so that top slither kind of shape at the very top of the wagon. We're not going to paint that yet, but everything below that is going to be this deep red, going in left and right strokes, and then curved strokes on the right and left edges. When we are done filling in the shape, we're going to add a little bit of shadow next. So with your red and on your palette, you are actually going to grab a little bit of black on your brush, kind of wipe it off on the palette a little bit, and we're just going to take this color and blend wet on wet up here and over, kind of maybe on the side, kind of just curve that down. We want a little bit of shadow right here at the top, because that's the part that's kind of under the opening of the wagon, and so it would be a little bit shadowy. It's not pure black, we're just a little bit of black and red. So if you would rather just mix black and red on your palette, you can do it that way. And just very gently at the top, blend this dark shadowy color down into the rest of the wagon, but not all the way down. So it's only dark and shadowy at the very, very top. We're going to add some dark and shadow at the bottom as well, but leave the middle part pure red. Don't blend dark in the middle part. So just down here, a little bit of the darker color. Blend that with your red very gently. So that's darker and shadowy at the bottom. I like to occasionally dip my brush in some water and kind of distribute that water with the paint on the palette. That kind of loosens that color a little bit and helps with blending. Sometimes if there's like a small area that I have to be precise about, I'll kind of twist my brush, and that helps to gather my bristles together. So we have this blended shadows at the top and the bottom, and let's rinse our brush. Next, we're going to introduce white into our red. So on our palette, just like what we did with the black, we're going to mix red and white together on the palette. So red, white, about equal parts, red and white. Test it out. It shouldn't be too bright. If it's too bright, add more red to it. Should just be several shades lighter than that red. I'm going to do some curves on the left and the right, and then I'm going to do left and right horizontal strokes in the middle to add a little bit of brightness and shiny sort of texture right in the middle, but I'm not going to over blend it. So I'm going to leave that kind of streaky there right in the middle. And then I'm going to use this color. So this is red and white still. So this top lip part of the wagon is going to be red and white mixed together. So that's going to show up a lighter red, and it's going to look really nice against that dark shadowy part and help it to stand out better. And I used my ruler for this as well because it's a horizontal area. So this ruler is going to help me kind of guide that line. I needed to make more of this light red color, so I added more red onto my palette, but I'm going to mix red and white together still and use that to paint the rest of this. When you're blending colors on the palette and you have to make more of that color, it's okay if it's not the exact same proportion. So if this ended up being slightly darker, that's fine. Gives some really pretty color variation when that happens. And a lot of times I don't even mix the colors right away. I'll mix them like half the way so it's still kind of streaky, and I'll let that blend on the canvas to create some really pretty different variations of that color. So there's the top part of our wagon. And next we're going to do the wheels. So rinse the brush, and we just need black for now. The wheels are black, white, and red, but we're going to do solid black circle first and then do the detailed white and red on it later. So I'm going to use my ruler again to line that up, and I will do the black circle. I'll start over here on the left. So you can start smaller than the drawing and then eventually work your way out to create your circle shape. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm starting smaller than the circle that I drew, and I'm taking my time and slowly filling that circle in. And then you can kind of work on the circumference of the circle and kind of adjust the shape of it. But again, if you're like me, your circles likely won't be perfect, and that's okay. Little line, diagonal line attaching from the wheel to the wagon. And I'm going to use my ruler again to line up and help me with the second circle. So same thing, solid black circle, kind of start in the middle and work your way outwards to form the shape of the circle. You could start, so if we started on the actual circumference of the drawing, that can work too. and then just fill it in solid. So next we're going to do the second set of wheels, and I don't want those to blend in too much with the first set. So I'm actually going to do those a dark gray so that it will stand out and look different. So on my palette, I'm mixing about 3 parts black to 1 part white. You can actually go a little bit lighter if it blends in too much. See, it's like a really dark gray, but I can still see the difference between the wheels. And I'm just going to do this guy back here. We only see like a crescent moon shape of this wheel. And then this one, same thing. These back wheels are optional if you're simplifying this painting. Another way you could have simplified this is you don't have to go do much shading or highlighting on the wagon itself. A lot of times these paintings, I'll render them by adding lots of shadowing and highlight, but you can skip that. You can simplify that. Do just a little bit of shading, a little bit of highlighting. You don't have to go in as much detail with it. So I'm going back and adjusting this wheel, but what's happening is I still have that gray on my brush, so it's actually blending in a little bit too much, but that's okay. We can kind of adjust that later, as long as I can still tell that they're 2 separate wheels. So we're going to need to let this dry before adding the white circles. You want to maybe just kind of adjust the outer shape of the circle. Get that as circular as possible. And we can start painting the handle and the piece, this piece that the handle attaches to. So I actually take this black and go out horizontally. And then I'll sketch it this way. So this part goes out, and it's going to come up. And it's going to bend towards the right. A little bit of water on the brush kind of helps to create these thin, kind of precise lines that I'm trying to do. So twisting the brush and adding little bits of water into the black helps you get that smooth line and gets it to be straight. And then we'll do the little handle, little rectangular shape. I did a little circle over here. And then I did another little circle over here. Let's wait for all this to dry. So here's like a good break stopping point, just adjusting the circles slightly. So let it dry, come back, and let's use some fresh titanium white to paint the white part of the wheel. So brush is all rinsed off and there's just white on my brush. I'm going to start in the center and I'm going to form my circle. So I'm going to start small and then kind of form my circle outwards. So just kind of bring that outwards to form that circle. We still want to leave kind of a donut shape of that black still showing. I'm going to do this on both of the tires. And I'm also going to do this on the back tires as well. So when we do the back tires, you want to kind of think about where the front tire black part is. You want to make sure you don't paint over that, but you still do kind of like a slither crescent moon shape in there. And if you mess up, you can let that dry and then go back with your black and adjust it. So we're going to do this to the same thing over here on the right to both of the tires. This is optional, but I'm going to add maybe a little bit of highlighting to the handle. So I have black and white on my brush, a little bit of black, a little bit of white, and I'm just going to go back over the handle and just kind of very gently just kind of give it this light sort of gray or this dark kind of gray color. So it's not solid black. So right here on the handle, just a little bit of highlight along the shape, but leaving a lot of that black still showing through. I'm going to add some shadow on the ground. So this kind of helps to disguise our wobbly looking tires. So get some green on your brush. We can use the same green that's on our palette, the light green permanent color. Add a little bit of black to it so it becomes like a dark green. And we want to dry brush this. So that means you're loading a little bit of paint on your brush, and get a towel, or you can wipe it off on your palette. I like to do either or, sometimes both. And that makes sure that there's only like a little bit of paint on your brush, and you're just barely letting this kind of touch the surface of the canvas. It's going to show up dry. It's not going to paint solid. It's going to be kind of translucent, see-through. And we're only doing a shadow that's casted towards the right and not so much towards the left. Rinse your brush next, and let's do the red dot on the center part of our tire. Make sure the white is dry, and just take your red and your round brush and just do a little dot, maybe more like a circle, just a small red circle in the very center, and do this on both of the tires. We don't see it on the back tires. If you have any leftover pencil lines, you can use just a regular pink eraser to erase. Just be very careful not to rip your canvas as you're erasing, and it should just come off as long as it's not been painted over. The pencil lines will erase. This next part of our painting, we are going to be doing the cacti and succulents. And so let's go ahead and get started with that. I'm going to be still using this number 4 round brush for the remainder of this painting. And we have Cad Yellow Light Hue, which is a brighter yellow than the one we used earlier. And I have that mixed with titanium white, so that this will show up nice and bright, especially this part of the sky where it's yellow. I need it to stand out. So I'm just painting a very simple curved sort of pot, rounded pot with a flat top for this first succulent. And it's okay if we paint some of this over that top lip part of the wagon. We can just go back and fix that later. So we have a small kind of curved pot, and I'm going to do a pointed sort of type of plant in this. And let's use the color Brilliant Yellow Green, or actually no, Light Green Permanent, and mix. We can mix yellow into it. So a lot of these we're just kind of making colors on the palette. So right now I'm mixing green and yellow and maybe a little bit of that white in there. But each of these little pointed pieces are going to be a slightly different shade or tint of green, and that helps it to stand out a little bit better. So this one ended up being darker than the one next to it, and that's how we can create overlapping in this plant. So I'm just doing curved and pointed ends for this type of plant. We can take this, curve it outwards. That one had a little bit more yellow in it. This one maybe a little bit more green. So we can play around with our yellow, white, and green to create different variations of that as it overlaps, and that helps to get that to stand out. So there's our first simple little plant. Later on we could add some decoration on that pot, but we need that yellow to dry. I'm introducing the color Phthalo Green to our palette. This is a really pretty kind of bluish green color, but this is going to help us create even more variations of green. Since all these cacti plants are green, we still need them to stand out and kind of look different from each other, so we're going to play around with this color next. So without rinsing the brush, I grabbed the green and I'm going to do kind of a prickly pear style cactus next. So this piece is kind of flat on the bottom, kind of curved and rounded at the top. I could take maybe a little bit of yellow and kind of blend that in without over blending. And I'm going to create little prickly pear pieces attached to it. So another little arm sticking out. These are all just sort of teardrop shapes where the bottom part is pointed and the top part is round. White blends really nicely with this phthalo green color. So if you add just a dot of white to your brush and let that blend on the canvas with your green, it'll create some really pretty color variations of green. So I'm doing another little teardrop shape. You can blend it without over blending it. On the canvas, you have some really pretty variations of white blending with our green. Let's create another arm teardrop shape coming out. So you are definitely welcome to change this painting up. You can do bigger plants in there. You don't have to do as many plants as I'm doing. I'm going to do a lot of little cacti succulents in this wagon, but you don't have to do as many. You can do bigger ones and maybe 3 or 4 plants and just keep it simple. A few little strokes of that white just kind of curving down gives that succulent plant really pretty kind of variation of highlight color. And let's do a little barrow cactus over here on the right. So this time I changed our green to more of that light green permanent color and just a little kind of barrel shape. Grab some darker green, kind of stroke down to create some shadowy areas of that, but pretty simple. Leave it like that. I'm going to do a saguaro cactus plant, and I know this is not realistic because saguaros are giant plants that would not be this small inside of this wagon, but still, we don't have to be super realistic about this. So I'm going to do kind of the barrel style, but it's slender and taller. It's a little bit narrow towards the bottom. I'm using the light green permanent and titanium white together. It's creating this really pretty light green color. And then for the arms, we're going to make the arms of this kind of the same style, but you want the arm to be thinner and then the end of that piece to be wider. So I'm kind of doing lighter pressure on the brush at first, and when I stroke upwards to create the arm, that end piece is kind of wider and more curved. So bigger at the top, smaller at the bottom. Next, I'm going to do an agave style plant, and I'm going to utilize a little bit of the black into this green. So I'm going to take this phthalo green, add some white, and just a touch of black into that. It's going to make it kind of this grayish green color. And we can do the same kind of leaves that we did in the first plant, that bright yellow green plant we did, maybe a little bit longer. And we're doing the same kind of thing where we're just kind of like overlapping the leaves. So you want to kind of just vary your colors. So like you can add a little bit more black into that to give it more of a grayish color, make it a little bit darker. So you're just overlapping your leaves, and they're pointed at the top, rounded at the bottom. A little bit more green for this guy. And you're just kind of changing the color up by loading your brush into different amounts of your phthalo green, little bits of white and little bits of black. It gives it that grayish green color. So right now I'm having these pieces overlap the handle of the wagon, but we can always repaint the handle to overlap that if we want it to look like the handle is in front of the plant or behind it. We can kind of decide that later. So I'm going to rinse, and we can do a different kind of plant. So maybe we have room for another pot in this. Again, you're welcome to change this up. You don't have to do the same colors and styles. You can change the shape of the pot if you want, the position of it, the height, the width of it. This one's going to be pink, so I'm going to use primary red and white and make a pink on my palette. And we're going to put the pot right here. So a little bit more shallow than the yellow one. It's going to overlap our saguaro cactus. It's going to be rounded with a flat edge at the top. So then I'm going to do an orange kind of line on the yellow pot that I did earlier. So I'm making orange on my palette. Mix yellow with your red, a little bit of white, and then we can do like this wavy line right here. So you can add different decorative elements to your pots. So I'm going to do what's called a Portulacaria plant, elephant bush. It's has the stems and little rounded circular green pieces connected to the stem. So I'm just doing this with black and a little bit of phthalo green, even though the stems are usually reddish, but I'm just doing the darker color first. And then I'm going to grab green on my brush, and I'm going to do like little rounded paint strokes on each side of the stem. So you just kind of press down on your brush to create little rounded paint strokes. So you can use the phthalo green, you could use little bits of white in the green if you want to kind of lighten some of those, but just really simple little rounded paint strokes. This one right here in particular, I added a little bit of white to my brush that gave it some color variation. We can even go back over some of the little rounded pieces with a little bit of white. We just don't want it to blend in too much with the whatever green you have behind it. And I wanted some kind of plant that to be kind of dangling over the edge of the wagon. So I'm going to do string of pearls, another little succulent plant that it's just a bunch of little tiny circles attached to a stem, but I didn't paint the stem. I'm just doing dots of green and yellow. So this is the light green with a little bit of the light yellow color, and just taking my round brush and making little columns of dots just kind of dangling over the edge of the wagon. Next, I'm going to do a white zigzag on the pink pot. So rinse, grab the titanium white, and I'm just doing a very basic zigzag design on this. I'm also going to adjust the top of the wagon. So anywhere we might have overlapped plants where it shouldn't be overlapped, we can go back and repaint the top lip part of the wagon. So that one, remember, was Cad Red Deep mixed with white. You can mix that color again on your palette and go back and repaint whatever you need to repaint over. So now that we have the base of our plants, we can take this a step further and add more detail to it. Of course, if you don't want to go further and add much more detail, you can leave it like this, simplified. I'm actually going to use the back of my paintbrush to paint little dots, and I'm going to do this on several of my barrel cactus and swirl cactus and the prickly pear. So along the darker lines, and I'm just doing little dots using the back of the brush in titanium white. So little white dots. You don't even have to press all the way down on the brush. You can just allow the paint to just barely touch the canvas, and it creates that little tiny dot for you. So that's a fun little trick you can use. And so like the prickly pear, did them mostly in kind of rows, kind of varying shapes. So some of the circles are bigger, some are smaller. Kind of did that on purpose. Swirl cactus, I'm painting them in rows as well, kind of vertical columns. And you don't even have to do this on the swirl. If you want, we can just do the spikes instead of the little dots. So that's a fun decorative detail we can add to our cacti. We can also add blossoms to these, so we can use a variety of colors in our blossoms. I'm going to use yellow and pink. If you want to add orange blossoms, you can. Let's start with pink. So I have primary red and titanium white. So these are very, very simple. I'm just going to start at the top. And depending on where you are in the background, you may need to make it lighter or darker. So for example, this is a darker part of the sky. So more white in that color to help that really stand out. So to create these blossoms, I'm just stroking upwards to form like this cup shape flower on the very, very top of the cactus arms. And I'll do another bloom of the same color on our little barrow cactus. For the prickly pear, I'm going to change colors, and I'm going to do yellow instead of pink to add some variety, but it's going to be the same exact technique. So I'm going to rinse and use the light yellow color and mix a little bit of white into our light yellow color. So take that. Actually, you may not need to mix a little white into it because this light yellow is already a bright kind of opaque color. But if you need to, you can try that without or with the white, whatever looks best. But same kind of technique with the simple blossoms. I almost thought about adding a teeny tiny hummingbird, but that would have been a very small detail to add. So this particular plant right here, I'm going to do little diagonal kind of carrot sort of lines, triangular lines on this plant with the white. If you need to, you can even kind of lightly outline some of the sides of these with the white. So what I'm going to demonstrate next is optional, but it's fun. I'm going to be using a black POSCA paint pen. So this is a fine tip one. It's the 0.7 mm tip POSCA black pen, and we can take this and we can sort of just outline areas of our cacti succulents to kind of it helps to make it stand out, add another detail. We can even use it to paint some of the prickly parts of the cactus. So I'm just going to take this and outline. I'm not going to outline everything, just some of the parts, so just loosely. In fact, I'm holding this paint pen very lightly. The lines I'm creating are not super continuous lines, except for these little prickly pieces. I'm doing spikes on the cactus, so that's fun. And if you don't like the look of the outlining, you don't have to use the paint pen, or if you don't have the paint pen, you could perhaps try it with a black Sharpie, fine tip one, or even like a tiny detail round brush and use Mars black paint. But right here, I'm actually going to just use this to kind of fill in the handle. So I made that one overlapping our agave plant. So I'm going to outline some of the sides of this agave plant, and you can see how that really helps to get some of those leaves to be more defined. Maybe some of the pots can be outlined, like the sides and the top part. Barrel cactus. Maybe some of the lines in the middle part of the barrel cactus. Sides of the prickly pear. So here's another part where I'm just holding that pen very loosely. I'm not doing a continuous line. I'm just very loosely outlining it. Maybe we can use it to touch up parts of the wagon so we can really get in there and define our circles and the wheels better. We can outline the very bottom edge of our wagon. I'm going to add a highlight to the wagon. I'm going to rinse and dry, grab a little bit of white and do a curve, maybe wipe it off just a little bit so that this isn't super opaque, so maybe more dry brush style. And just a highlight on the curved parts on both sides of the wagon gives it the extra shiny look. It's kind of fun. We could do a little bit of lighter color along the top edge, but not go too crazy. So I'm just kind of lightly dry brushing that. And if we want, we can even add just a touch on the sides of the wheels without making them too bright. We still want the wheels to be dark compared to the white center part. So this is where we can call our painting finished, or we can keep going. I had so much fun with this painting, I just wanted to paint more succulents. So I did another little pot in the lower right part that's on the ground, kind of a fun little decorative touch to this. I'm adding another pot right here that's just sitting on the ground next to the wagon. And I'm outlining that with the color white first. So this is still the floor round brush, the white, and I'm painting kind of a rounded pot with a base on the bottom. And then I'll do sort of like a light pink, peach-ish color for the pot. So I'm just painting that in. I'm going to have down here go in a curved direction, but that white first layer is not dry, so it is blending with this color and making it lighter. Maybe this part has a little bit more of an oval opening, even though that barrel cactus is going to be covering that opening anyway. And then a little bit of that, more of that pink, darker pink towards the bottom. And there's my simple little pot. I'm going to rinse and do a barrel cactus in this. So let's do green and yellow. We have the light green permanent color mixed with the cad yellow light color. We can double load it, we can mix them together, but I like how they just kind of blend together on the canvas. So with this barrel cactus, I'm actually having my paint strokes kind of curve downwards to form the shape, and it shows a little bit of the lines on the cactus. I could also take my white and go back and actually paint these lines. They curve at the top, and you're just stroking down with one stroke to create the lines of the cactus. And we can do little arms on this. I'm going to rinse and do this dark pink at the bottom right here, the base of the cactus, and add stripes to the pot. Do a darker line on the right side, and we can do a lighter line on the left side of the pot to kind of highlight that. I'm going to rinse and grab the whites and do so this little white line over here on the right side, and on the right side of the base. We can do little flowers on this guy, so we can do yellow, but that yellow's not showing up, so I'm going to do, because of where the sky is, grab my pink, or grab more yellow and then mix it with the pink to do more of an orange color, so that stands out better. And we can use the back of our brush to do little dots for the little prickly parts of the barrel cactus. And this little guy needs a shadow too because it's on the ground. So we can use our dark green mixed with black. So I'm actually going to grab the Phthalo Green this time and mix that with a little bit of the Mars Black. And again, it's dry brush style, so only a little tiny bit of paint on the brush, and you're just gently kind of dragging that color below the pot and dragging it towards the right. A little black outline on the bottom. Next up, I'll show you how I did the quote at the top. So I am going to do, "You can grow your own way." Such a fun quote for this kind of cactus painting in a wagon. You're definitely welcome to switch the quote to anything you want it to say. You can kind of look up quotes on Google that relate to succulents or cactus, cacti, gardening, anything like that. So you can definitely customize this. I recommend writing it out in pencil first. So I'm doing cursive, with just a regular pencil. That way I could kind of adjust my placement if needed before I do the permanent paint pen. The paint pen will erase before it dries, but once it's dried, it's not going to erase. You can paint over it, but it won't erase. So anyway, I have that written out. You could also do a quote or a word on the side of the wagon instead of the quote in the sky. So anything you want to do. I'm going to take my paint pen and do some prickly lines on this little guy before I outline my lettering. So for the lettering, I'm going to use the same paint pen, the black POSCA Fine Tip Paint Pen, and I'm just going to go over my cursive letters with that. So with this particular pen, I find that, so you have to kind of press on the tip to get that flow going. If you hold it more at an angle versus like directly vertically, you don't get as much of that kind of like buckling that happens with this pen. So if it starts buckling or gets caught on the texture of the canvas, it starts kind of splashing and makes your line kind of like messy because it splashes. So a way around that I found to just kind of hold it more at an angle and not press too hard with the paint pen. And that kind of prevents the splashing that happens. So if you're like me and you don't exactly go over your lines you drew or your letters you drew with the pencil will erase after the paint pen dries all the way. I like to go back and kind of make my cursive a little bit more fancy. So I'm going to go back and adjust the thickness on the letters, mostly towards the left side of each of the letters. I'm making, so you see what I did with the Y there on the left side of that curve. I made it thicker. The left side of the U and the O, making thicker and letting that kind of adjust thickness throughout the letter. And that kind of gives it that fancy lettering look. And then on the left side of each of the first letters on each of the words, I'm just doing 2 or 3 little dots. Gives it another decorative touch. So when this dries, you can erase any leftover pencil marks. And that is it. This is the conclusion of how to paint Grow Your Own Way. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.